In the previous video, I talked about EA's business model and design philosophy regarding its Madden NFL football video game series. In that first part, I talked about my opinions on how I think EA is doing damage to its own product by splitting its resources between three completely divergent game modes in Franchise, Ultimate Team, and now Longshot. These different game modes are competing for the internal resources of EA, and one of them is clearly much more profitable than the others, and that one, therefore, seems to have become the impetus of all of EA's design efforts. The quality of the game, therefore, has become rather stagnant over the last 10 to 15 years, with EA consistently adding features, removing features, putting back in features that used to be in the game but which were removed, or putting in new features that break or expose flaws with the old features. They also do not fix legacy problems that have been in the game for years, things like warping, sliding, and clipping issues in which players' bodies can go through other players' bodies. And the game manipulates animations in order to achieve scripted outcomes.
And possession will switch hands, 1st and 10. Jordan Howard and the rest of the offense heading back out there. And we have seen a decline in the numbers. Where does the fault lie? Just him? Maybe the guys up front? Combination?
And I talked about all the halftime shows that have come and gone over the past 10 or so years. EA puts a new halftime show in, it feels half-finished, it stagnates for 2 or 3 years, then they cut it out and put an entirely new halftime show in, that one stagnates for 2 years, and so on and so on. I even pitched some ideas for how EA could improve their pre-game, halftime, and post-game presentation.
Back in 1924, but renovated in 2002. There's a look inside venerable Soldier Field in Chicago. Just a short time ago, this crowd loud enough to shake the foundations of this nearly century-old building. They are ready for football.
And now it's time for part 2. Are you ready for some Monday Night Madden criticism?
EA Sports. It's in the game.
Tiburon also has a track record of removing features. Sometimes they remove features that don't work, and their removal probably improves the game. The QB vision cone comes to mind. Other times, features that are popular just disappear. The Tony Bruno radio show, or being able to hire offensive coordinators and assistant coaches, or the team and stadium creators, or the expansion draft from Madden 2002, and on and on. In both cases, however, they rarely, if ever, bother trying to improve a feature or fix major problems with it. Look at, for example, the QB vision cone, going all the way back to Madden 2006. That feature required the user to rotate the QB's head in order to accurately throw to a receiver within his field of vision. In principle, it's a very good idea, at least as far as simulating the sport of football goes. In practice, however, it was cumbersome to use, to say the least. This feature stuck around for several years and showed up as late as Madden 2008 on the PS3 and Xbox 360. That's right, that feature survived being ported into the next generation from PS2 to PS3 era. That feature was probably rightfully removed, as it didn't really add enough to the game to be worth what it cost for the developers to maintain and for the actual users to utilize. Though some people actually do continue to defend it to this day, and every now and then a petition shows up asking for EA to reinstate the vision cone. Personally, I didn't mind the feature, and I wouldn't be opposed to a version of it returning to the game. Anyway, whether you like the feature or not, Tiburon never really did anything with it after its initial launch, other than to add an option to outright disable it in the menu. They didn't try to redesign the controls to make it less cumbersome, even with the advent of motion controls for the Wii and PS3. They didn't try implementing any new assist features for the Vision Cone, nor did they try to rebalance it to make it easier to use. It just sat around for 3 years, basically collecting dust before Tiburon finally decided to just throw it away completely.
And as a result, his field of vision is the biggest in Madden. He can almost see the entire field.
This past year, we saw a similar situation with the targeted passing feature of Madden 18. The marketing for Madden 18 claimed that targeted passing would revolutionize the game. And even the Longshot story mode was built, at least in part, to showcase that mechanic, as many of its scripted mini-games and scenarios used a variation of the targeted passing mechanic.
Nice throw.
Targeted passing, however, is simply gone in Madden 19. They didn't try to come up with a more comfortable control scheme as a compromise. It's not disabled by default and hidden behind a menu like the QB Vision Cone was for a couple years. It's just completely gone, out of the game. It didn't even make it into a second year before being shipped off to the land of the QB Vision Cone. Consumers didn't care for it, so EA apparently just abandoned it. All that development effort was just wasted. Had they not bothered with targeted passing, maybe Madden 19's real player motion locomotion system could have been implemented a year early. Not that it would have made much of a difference. Speaking of real player motion, it's basically just a rebranding of the True Step feature that was part of Madden 25. And then it mysteriously disappeared, I guess. Maybe it didn't survive the transition to the Frostbite engine, or maybe it was gone long before Frostbite. But now they're selling it to us again with the moniker Real Player Motion in Madden 19. Or how about any variation of the Ice the Kicker feature, which have come in and out of Madden and NCAA football over the course of the years. Is that still in Madden 19? I don't think it is. It was definitely in Madden 17. At least I haven't seen it in Madden 19 yet.
2 for 2 tonight. This will be for the win. And his kick is no good. Oh, by the slimmest of margins, he missed it wide to the left. So a field goal that could have won it.
Then there's the tackle battle mechanic, which, in my opinion, is one of the most confounding features in the game. This is a mechanic that allows the user to override a tackle animation or a tackle breaking animation by pressing a random button on a QuickTime prompt. Now, I'm not inherently opposed to the idea of QuickTime events. Sometimes they work just fine. In fact, Madden's implementation of the tackle battle is, I think, one of the less offensive executions of a QTE-like mechanic. However, in the context of simulation football, this mechanic spits in the face of any sort of physics or locomotion system that might be in the game. If you claim that your engine uses weight and momentum and leverage and position to calculate a physics-based tackle, then how can you simultaneously include a feature that cancels all of that out? How is this feature still in the game? But the targeted passing mechanic, which actually had the potential to revolutionize the game, is completely out. Whew. All right, let me calm down a bit and maybe even try to wrap this up. I understand the point of the tackle battle mechanic.
Tackle battles are a new in-game mechanic that help you break tackles and gain extra yards. This new tool gives you more creativity as a ball carrier than ever before.
It's to give the user some control and influence over the outcome of the play, which, you know, fine, whatever. I still think it's a garbage mechanic, though. If you want a mechanic like this, then you should design the mechanic so that instead of pushing a random button to trigger a random animation, The user should just be allowed to perform the regular ball carrier or tackle moves, and if the weight, distribution, momentum, and relative leverage position of the players allows it, then the tackle gets to be broken with an appropriate animation. Make it a procedural part of your supposedly physics-based gameplay, not a random button-mashing QuickTime event. Heck, most of the time, another defender comes and knocks me down before I even resolve the tackle battle one way or the other. So it's mostly a moot feature anyway. But hey, at least it's not for the fight for the fumble feature. Am I right?
They'll pile up for it. Jackson grabs it on the ground. The Eagles are able to win the football. They keep possession.
I'm not really sure who got to that ball first. I think it changed possessions a few times at the bottom of that pile, but the offense came away with it, and they earned it.
There's also a series of fundamental football concepts that have never really been properly implemented in Madden. Screen passes, draws, and play-action passes have always been problematic, as have been pretty much every trick play that exists in football that has ever tried to be represented in Madden. In real football, in a screen pass, blockers are supposed to hit the defender and then let them release before pulling out into the flats to block for the screen. This is supposed to slow down the defenders and make them think that they beat the block so that they don't realize that the play is a screen pass. After all, if a defender jumps out in between the quarterback and the running back who's the target of the screen, that can be not only an easy interception, but an easy interception return for a touchdown by the defense. So fooling the defensive lineman into thinking that they've beaten the block and then continuing to rush upfield towards the quarterback is essential to the success of this play.
Is already the defensive MVP of the season.
Screen passes are supposed to be among the safest passes in football if they're executed correctly. In Madden, however, they don't reliably work. In Madden, the blockers don't even touch the defenders before pulling out to block the screen. Ever. I don't remember a time in Madden in which they ever did. This not only makes it trivial for a user controlling a defensive lineman to recognize the screen, even when in whatever variation of a camera lock or first person that they happen to be playing in, but it also gives every single defender at the line of scrimmage a clean break on the quarterback. In some iterations of Madden, screen passes have had worse than a 50-50 chance for the QB being sacked before the running back even gets out into the flats. Even in the iterations of Madden that do have relatively well-functioning screen passes, the likelihood of a sack is still fairly substantial. Receiver screens, also known as bubble screens, aren't much better, as the camera angle usually prevents the user from even being able to see the target of the pass. You have no idea if the receiver is in position when you throw the pass, or if the defense is converging on it. These passes also have an unreasonably high chance of being intercepted and returned for a touchdown in the game. Draws, on the other hand, are intended to lure the defense deep into the backfield, leaving large lanes for the running back to run through. This is not the case in Madden, however, as defensive rushers treat the play as a run. They don't rush upfield as far as they should, and they are too good at shedding their blocks and filling the gaps. Play-action passes have also been a crapshoot in Madden for, well, pretty much forever. Blockers don't hold blocks long enough to complete the play-action fake, which leaves the QB vulnerable to sacks. This is actually somewhat realistic, admittedly. But the problem is that, at least on any difficulty level above Pro, neither the rushers nor the defensive secondary ever bite on the play action, no matter how efficiently you've established the run, because the CPU is completely oblivious to your habits and tendencies. And don't even get me started on the other, more complicated trick plays. Things like end-arounds, reverses, flea flickers, halfback passes, and onside kicks. Ugh. Onside kicks are just the worst. Admittedly, onside kicks are a pretty rare occurrence in real football, so it kind of makes sense that the video game developers probably wouldn't put too much effort into it. I've actually never seen a video game implement onside kicks in a way that even remotely approaches realism. But the big problem, however, is that when onside kicks do happen, they're almost always game-deciding plays. So, in that sense, especially in a competitive environment, it actually is important for them to work properly.
Why not start with this? On the pass from Aaron Rodgers, and an onside kick, tried a big bounce. Bradley Fletcher was unbended, and it looks like the Packers may have it.
Madden's loose ball gameplay has always been atrocious. The player who fumbles the ball and the player who caused the fumble are rarely, if ever, even aware that the fumble happened, and they make no effort at all to try to recover the ball. They will sometimes lay on the ground while the ball just rolls around right next to them. Sometimes they'll even lay there while the ball is sitting in their lap. This is because they are trapped in animation scripts that don't have any branches for recovering loose balls. As for the players who do try to recover the ball, they are also often laughably incompetent and unrealistic. They will often kick the ball around, or the ball will just magnetically attach itself to the first player's hand as he walks by, allowing him to effortlessly pick up the ball and run with it. This allows for far too many fumbles being returned for touchdowns by the defense, and it makes onside kicks completely unrealistic. Lastly, there's the things that are actually included in the game, but which EA and Tiburon have yet to actually do anything with. Perhaps the single best example of this is the fact that there is a long snapper position included on depth charts. It's a completely pointless delineation to make. There's no player ratings, attributes, or traits of any kind that define who is a good long snapper and who isn't. It doesn't matter who you put into this position. So the position completely doesn't need to be there. As it currently stands, there's not even really any reason for long snappers to be their own position. Long snaps never go wrong, or at least not totally wrong. Madden actually does have animations for poor snaps. I've never seen one happen on a field goal or a punt, but I have seen off-target snaps that occasionally go to the quarterbacks in the shotgun or pistol. As far as I can tell, though, these poor snaps are purely superficial. They never actually bounce off the ground or go flying over the QB's head and result in a broken play. The snap is never premature or fumbled by the QB, and the bad snaps do not, as far as I can tell, throw off the timing of the play at all.
Ground ball snap, and remember, and we should have said it, it's a new long snapper. Kondo never returned with the head injury. The new snapper is Travis Gaethel.
These backups do not get a lot of snaps. These backup long snappers, and your kicking game can go awry in a hurry without that timing.
Of course, trying to propose that the game models something like botched snaps is exactly the sort of thing that will get you flamed and harassed by Madden fanboys and apologists. They say that they don't want games decided by flukes like botched snaps. But actual NFL games are occasionally decided by those sorts of plays.
This crowd is loud. They talk about the 12th man in Seattle. Look how this game starts. Yeah, but just a miscommunication there. Peyton Manning is coming up to the line to either make a protection check or change the play.
Besides, what's the difference between the random chance of a botched snap or the random chance of a dropped pass or a fumble on a running play? Madden games can be decided by those sorts of plays. It's acceptable because players have ratings that determine how frequently they drop passes or fumble the ball. So you, as a user, at least have some control over whether or not you give the ball to those players. So, in summary, we have a long snapper position, but no qualities that make a player a good long snapper or a bad long snapper, nor do we have any mechanics for whether or not that player is good or bad at long snapping to even be relevant, because snaps, at least on punts and field goals, can't be botched. But what we do have are animations for QBs adjusting to bad snaps, catching high or low snaps. But these have absolutely no impact on the play at all, nor is there any characteristic of a center that defines whether or not he'll correctly execute a pistol or shotgun snap. Why are either of these things in the game, and they have been for years, if they don't do anything? The long snapper position has been in the game for as long as I can remember, going back, I think, even as far as the PS2 era. But it's never had any impact on the game at all. So why don't we just add a rating or trait that defines who's good at snapping and at long snapping? Then we'd have a similar mechanic to catching or fumbling. Plus, from a franchise perspective, it would mean that you would have to choose whether to allocate a roster spot for a dedicated long snapper, because if you don't, you'd risk something like a field goal snap being driven into the ground or a snap going over the head of a punter and out the back of the end zone. There would actually be an element of strategy to that. It's a perfectly viable mechanic to put in the game as it ties to team building. Apparently, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Some NFL teams have also thrown mud at EA for not properly representing long snappers in the game. And if they can't properly represent long snappers, then I guess I should forget about my hopes that they'll represent holders, gunners, and other special team positions. Sorry, Steve Tasker, even in Madden, you get snubbed. Anyway, the end result is that by inserting and removing all of these modular features and mechanics, we end up with a bunch of janky, half-working ideas and concepts that don't necessarily fit together to create a cohesive or compelling gameplay experience. And we can't have a cohesive game experience because instead of going back and making the non-cohesive parts more cohesive, EA insists on just throwing another new mechanic into the pile to see if it sticks. There's no consistent design philosophy or unifying vision for this game. This is actually why, despite all of its problems, Madden 17 actually stood out to me as a complete product. Again, see my full review on my personal blog. Link in the description. All three phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams, had been redesigned and rebuilt with a consistent design philosophy over the course of 3 years. The new features that had been put in between Madden 15 and 17 complemented each other, both on the field and off. It was probably the best 3-year run for the series since the mid-2000s. But now it looks like EA is back to throwing darts at a board, putting in a level of effort into the non-Ultimate Team elements of the game that is comparable to Jay Cutler in the Wildcat. And that is why we Madden players cannot have nice things.
You know, this isn't something that I just lend my name to, put my name on. I've been I've been in the development of this game from day one. I mean, at one time there was just 2 guys, and I was one of them. I always tell the story that, one of my goals was to make the game on the video game look like television. And then when I was at Fox, David Hill, who was the president of Fox Sports, was talking to a group at Fox in a meeting, and he said, we want to make the game on television look like the video game. And I thought, man, we did it. We came full circle. We started out wanting to look like them, and then they wanted to look like us, and that was our goal. That was what we wanted to do. And when we were so far away from it, you think, oh, that'll never happen if we just get close. And obviously we did better than get close. We keep getting better every year. That the game, 09 will be better than 08. It was better than 07. And we just keep improving, because I've always been one to say that you can't stay the same. If you try and stay the same, if we ever say, okay, we got it, this is it, let's just keep this one, and everyone's going to buy it, and you'll slip, because you don't stay. When you either go up or you go down. And the thing that makes me the most proud is every year we know that, and every year we go up. I've always been one to say that you can't stay the same. If you try and stay the same, if we ever say, okay, we got it, this is it, let's just keep this one, and everyone's going to buy it, and you'll slip, because you don't stay. When you either go up or you go down.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening to this. I apologize if it got a little ranty, but I'm curious. What do you listeners think? Would you buy a Madden release that on the back of the box says, we didn't add any new features, but we fixed all the stuff that was broken? I mean, I personally feel like I probably would. Well, thanks again for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. This is actually my first attempt at any sort of long-form video analysis like this. So it's bound to be very rough around the edges. I'm hoping that I'll get better as I do more of these, and I would like to do more of these. If you really enjoyed this video, then I invite you to check out my blog. It's at www.megabearsfan.net. It includes reviews of Madden, as well as some suggestion and idea topics that I've had for improving the game over the years, as well as reviews of other games, analysis of games, strategy guides, movie reviews, my thoughts on actual football. So yeah, please check it out. And if you really, really like the video, or you like the blog, or both, please feel free to become a patron on my Patreon account, the money from which will go towards maintaining the megabearsfan.net blog and domain. I'm also considering doing some kind of charity or nonprofit matching incentive, so that when I hit certain goals, I'll make some matching donation to a charity or nonprofit. The specific details are yet to be determined, but there'll be more info on that on the Patreon page as I make any final decisions. So thanks again for listening, and I hope you're enjoying Madden, and I hope the game gets better.